Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement. Our guest today is Dr. Paul W. Bennett. He's a director of the Schoolhouse Institute. Dr. Bennett, I just want to sort of dig deeper into the data a little bit. Is there a big gender gap issue that you've identified as well?
Yes, there's growing indications that the gender disparity was actually in very much boys were not doing as well, and there was a real effort to try to improve them. And the genders have become closer together, but there's just a general decline across the board in how students are performing. So I wouldn't put too much stock in that. I think you hit the key point, which is what's the impact of the pandemic. And
Right.
I do have some further data to share with you.
Yes, please.
Um, yeah, Harry Petrinos, who is the finance director and research director for the World Bank, in 2023, he assessed how countries performed in the pandemic. And he said, essentially, the longer you were out of school, your kids were out of school, the worse you did. And he assigned a number to Canada, and 26 was the figure, and that was basically the number of weeks that were disrupted in some way. And Ontario was leading the way, of course. And when you look at across Canada, it's hard to remember this. It was 5 years ago. We're coming up to 5 years, so
That's right.
our memories are short. And the lowest number of weeks lost was British Columbia, 11. And the highest was Ontario, 26. And he assessed, this is Harry Petrinos, that in the case of Ontario, that was essentially 1 year's worth of learning in mathematics and literacy. Can you imagine that? That's how much of a setback. The other thing is Harry Petrinos has been doing more research for the World Bank, and he's discovered that the gap has persisted amongst
right.
that cohort of students. It has not narrowed. It's continued. And I think the attitude of those in the system has been that they really didn't successfully close the gaps. So they're just hoping they graduate out. Um,
And
so,
it sounds like that online learning really didn't help matters, did it?
no, it was a terrible disaster. There's common agreement there. And another thing about the grade eights, keep in mind the grade eights that would have written in 2023, 5 years ago, they were in grade 2 and 3. So
Right.
another reason why they wouldn't be performing is they're way, way behind. So, the grade 8 students will be so far behind. We're talking about the grade 4s in math, and they've actually weren't in the school system
They weren't in
during.
the school system during the pandemic, but they're
Yeah,
still
so
doing
I think
poorly.
you're quite right about attributing it to longer term forces, and there's all kinds of reasons. But I'm one of the big things that I've come to the realization of it is during the pandemic we suspended every form of assessment, exams. We didn't participate in any data gathering. We were absent from all international tests, and we've lost a lot of goodwill and certainly our reputation worldwide by the way we managed the pandemic and the fact that we kind of went insular and we got into our cocoon.
Mm.
I call it data starvation. There was next to no data coming from Canada on how our students were doing. So the first instruments that are available are these ones, and the results are really abysmal.
It is really quite shocking. Uh, Student absenteeism, that continues to be a problem then.
I have written a lot about this and researched it and published many articles. And just to give you a very quick overview, before the pandemic, we had established that there were certain rates of absenteeism that were considered chronic. So it'd be 16 days a year, and you were assessed to be chronically absent, and that was a very small proportion of the student population. 5 to 7% maybe. Now it's upwards between 30 and 40% of the students miss 16 or more days, and they're chronically absent. Most studies show that absenteeism doubled over since the pandemic, and it's maintained a very high level of student absenteeism. I've also documented staff absenteeism, which is up too. And there was a consortium in Southern Ontario that released this data and then quickly shut it off. But it showed there's a problem with staff who were off a lot, made other arrangements, found it quite very comfortable, actually.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get them back onto regular routines. So I think those are all factors that are playing into this. And certainly in math,
Mhm.
that's a subject where teachers are critically important
Right.
because very few families have people in them with the capacity to teach
Sure.
math
Sure.
above grade 6. So that's really why it shows up more in the mathematics
Right.
area.
Right. We're going to take a brief break. Dr. Bennett will be back with you after these messages.